Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Tuesday afternoon. And a bit on a tight schedule. I have class directly after this podcast. So this might be a little bit shorter than most of the other podcasts that I do just because I need to be wary about the time and I have to, be mindful of it. So first segment, we're going to talk about Ohio State winning the NCAA Championship because that is obviously the biggest news of the entire day. Then in the second segment, we are going to look at the NBA Power Rankings of Week 14 because I did not do that yesterday because everything was football yesterday. So we're going to talk about that in the next segment. And then in the third segment, we're going to talk about the Cowboys and how they have even more pitiful accolades now to their already pitiful resume. We're going to quickly talk about that because I want to. And then in the fourth segment, we're going to talk about a quick recap of the NBA games over the weekend, as well as the NBA games on Monday. Might do that a little bit quicker than I normally do just because I want to be wary about the time. And then there's obviously a special fifth segment at the end, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, or something that you're just dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So let's go right ahead, get into this talk. So as we know, let me just go ahead and pull up the slides real quick. Give me 1 second. So Ohio State, they ended up doing it. They ended up winning it all, the NCAA Championship. Now, I will completely admit I did not expect them to win going into the college football playoffs just after, directly after their game against Michigan. Now, when they beat Tennessee, then I was like, okay, maybe they sort of learned from that loss. Maybe Ohio State needed that loss in order to propel themselves to get over the top. That's usually what it takes to win championships and to win in those big games. Like the realization that you're still not perfect, and as good as you've been playing all year, you still have your flaws, and you really have to work to it and try and minimize those flaws up until the very end. Ironically enough, that was what happened to me and the defensive player of the game, Cody Simon, when we were chasing a state championship. We ended up losing the very last game of the season. We shouldn't have lost that game, but we ended up losing anyway. And it's heartbreaking because we lose to that team, the team that we lost to, every single year. Ever since we were both on the team, we just kept on losing to that team. They were St. Joseph's. Those guys were just unbelievable, a very talented school and a very talented football program. They would always, I tell you, always beat us. And we've never been able to, I don't think, I wasn't able to beat them. I don't think Cody Simon was able to beat them either. And it was the last game of the season, right? So going into the playoffs, then we worked extra hard to try and minimize all those kinds of mistakes so that if we do see them in the postseason, we are ready and we don't lose. And ultimately, we got lucky that we didn't end up seeing them, but we also had to face a really difficult team to win the entire game. And I think that I feel like if we would have won the game, like the final game of that season, I don't think we would have won the state championship. So similar to that, I think that Michigan loss for Ohio State was really, really, really important in them winning it all. And I will say though, I was very, very disappointed in Notre Dame's performance throughout the entirety of this game. One of the biggest takeaways that I had was that for some reason, when they were down, and it was fourth down, they were down by a couple scores, And they decided to take a field goal to try and make the game interesting. In my mind, I would go for it on that instance. Obviously, I'll go through the play-by-play, but this game was never close. Aside from the opening drive from Notre Dame, they did not do anything really all that memorable to try and make this game a little bit more interesting. The second the first half ended, I did not have a single doubt in my mind that Ohio State was going to end up winning the NCAA Championship. I had zero doubt in my mind. And really, either or of the outcomes I would have been totally fine with, because both of my teammates were in position, both of my former teammates were in position to win a state championship. Well, not a state championship, a national championship. So wouldn't have complained about the results if they were the other way around. But Notre Dame, they opened up with an 18-play touchdown drive. Straight masterpiece. They used up the entire first quarter on that singular drive. But then, of course, Ohio State, they answered back with another touchdown. And then the Fighting Irish, they just kept punting while Ohio State kept scoring. Here's how the play-by-play went. After Ohio State scored that touchdown, it was Notre Dame punt on a 3-and-out, Ohio State touchdown, Notre Dame punt on a 3-and-out, Ohio State touchdown, end of the half. And then Ohio State started with the ball, and then Ohio State scored a touchdown. Then Notre Dame ended with a turnover on downs. Then Ohio State took a field goal. And then finally, after they were down 31-7, the Fighting Irish ended up scoring a touchdown late in the third quarter. Ohio State ended up fumbling the ball. Then Notre Dame ended up missing a field goal. Then Ohio State punted. Then Notre Dame ended up taking a touchdown, scoring a touchdown. And then Ohio State capped off the game with a field goal. So if you notice, Ohio State, they did not punt once until the fourth quarter. That is straight dominance of this game. Straight dominance. And I mentioned earlier that Cody Simon, he ended up winning the defensive MVP for the Ohio State Buckeyes, and he ended up leading the team in tackles, ended up getting 4 solo tackles, did not record a sack, but he did record 1 tackle for loss, so obviously most valuable defensive player. He's most likely going to get drafted, and I am looking forward to it. The biggest takeaway and the biggest reason why I was also disappointed in Notre Dame and this game was that they were running man. And against a team as talented as Ohio State, why do you run man? For first off, the stats. Will Howard, he threw for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. Judkins, of course, rushed for 100 yards and rushed for 2 touchdowns because that is Judkins and that's what he does. And Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, forgive me, I almost messed that up. Jeremiah Smith, he had 88 yards, 1 touchdown on 5 receptions, and Egbuka had 6 receptions and 64 yards. So, not to mention, Judkins also had a receiving touchdown in that game as well. You cannot run man against somebody as good as Jeremiah Smith. You cannot do that. You can't. It's unfathomable to me that they were willing to let somebody go in a one-on-one situation with somebody as talented as, with actually 2 players as talented as Egbuka as well as Jeremiah Smith. And it just does not make any sense. Jeremiah Smith has been talked about as being one of the best freshmen in the entire nation and one of the best receivers. And Egbuka, ironically enough, I believe he's the leader for Ohio State in receiving yards, yet he's never been a wide receiver 1 on any of the Ohio State squads, which is unbelievable to think about, but it's really Jeremiah Smith. Leaving Jeremiah Smith in a one-on-one is just inexcusable in my opinion. You cannot do that. You're just asking to lose at that point. And that was my biggest takeaway. But that's all that again, just being wary of the time, that's all that I have in this first segment. Normally it would have been a little bit longer, but again, weary of time. So now we're going to go into the second segment where I talk about the NBA power rankings and just where they're standing at right now. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be looking at the NBA's power rankings of Week 14. And before I begin with that, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, a burning question, something you're dying to share. We are all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $sign below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. And you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So let's go ahead and get into this next segment where we talk about the power rankings. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those up. Just give me 1 second. And of course, I have not looked at these power rankings yet, even though they were already out for a day. So we're going into this completely blind. Now, already off the bat, OKC being at number 1 makes total sense. They ended up getting, as you can see here, I don't know if you can read it, but I watched that game. They ended up beating the Cavs, and they were leading by as much as 42 points. It was really, the game was never close going into that. They clearly wanted revenge, and they capitalized on that. Obviously, in this matchup, the Cavs, they ended up beating them first, then OKC ended up beating them in the next round. So if this ends up being the finals matchup, I wouldn't have any doubt in my mind that this goes to 7 games at the most, or at the very least, it should go to 6 games. This would be a very, very competitive series. Actually, I lied. It would not be a competitive series because the Thunder at that point would most likely have Chet Holmgren. And the fact that the Thunder are just this dominant, 35-7 without Chet, is unbelievable. And it really does debunk all of those people that thought Chet Holmgren was robbed of the Rookie of the Year, which is, I feel like they're all gone now, but still, like, clearly Chet Holmgren, like, the value that he brought to the Thunder was nowhere near the value that Victor Wembanyama brought to the Spurs, and the real reason why OKC was so good was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as well as the rest of the team, not to discredit them, but, you know, a lot of people, they were trying to give Chet Holmgren a little bit too much credit for things that I think he did not do. Next is obviously going to be Cleveland because, you know, top 1 and 2 is going to be Cleveland and OKC until the records get a little bit closer between them and I think who's third, Boston. Oh, wait, no. The Houston Rockets are third. So Boston should be fourth, right? Okay. That's a little bit interesting. Definitely an interesting decision to make. I mean, with the way that the Houston Rockets have been playing, I mean, they ended up beating the Memphis Grizzlies and clinched a tiebreaker with them in that resulting game. And I mean, the Celtics, they've been losing a couple of games that a lot of people don't think that they should have lost. They did destroy the Golden State Warriors in yesterday's game, but again, the power rankings were already out before that. No idea if that's going to really impact the power rankings. Jalen Green has been playing really well, so I guess Houston being at 3 makes a little bit of sense, but at the same time, I don't think, if I were to put Houston against the Boston Celtics, I'm picking the Celtics to win in that series. I don't think you would put Houston over Boston to win a series. I don't know. That's just me though. Then at number 5, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies ended up losing a really bad game to Houston. But despite this, they don't end up dropping much in the power rankings. And I get it. They're a top 3 team in the West, and they beat San Antonio a couple of times. But I don't know. I think normally, I feel like if this was any other team, they probably would have been dropped down a little bit more had they lost to Houston. Not entirely sure really how that works, but obviously, here's the difference of games when the Grizzlies, when they have Ja Morant and when they do not have Ja Morant. That name just completely blanked out for me. I have no idea why. But obviously we know Ja Morant is incredibly valuable to the team, so not really saying much. The Denver Nuggets, they moved back up to 6, and they've been winning. They've won 10 of their last 13 games, so maybe they finally figured it out with the tandem of Russ, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray. Maybe. Again, I don't think they figured it out. I'm not entirely sure if I would really pick this team to win the championship, but I will say this. If the playoffs were to end today, I believe they would still have to play the Lakers, which is unbelievable. It's like the Lakers cannot escape the Denver Nuggets to save their life. It genuinely does. I'm going to check the standings once again just to make sure. And okay, no, they would not have to play them. They would have to play Memphis going now. But again, the Western Conference is like really, really close in terms of team record. So don't forgive me for messing that up. But last time I saw that, they were going to play the Nuggets had the playoffs end today. Now the Knicks, they moved down from 6 down to 7. They're just 3-6 over the last 2.5 weeks. So I guess that's going to deduct some points from this team. The Pacers being at number 8 is still rather questionable in my opinion, and I would not want the Pacers to be ranked this high. But again, I don't really think there are many teams that could be over the Pacers, at least with the way that the NBA has been playing now. I mean, I do definitely think that the Clippers should be over the Pacers, though. That is definitely a fact. Now, even though the Clippers, they went 1-4, for some reason they ended up moving up, but they won 4 straight, so I guess that makes sense. But still, like, being 1-4, then winning 4 straight, your record is 5-4 in your last 9 games. I don't know if moving yourself up for that by 1 is valid. And Minnesota still being this high despite this record, I think they are, I was honestly skimming through the records, yes, but they are the only team in the top 10 of the power rankings that have 20 losses already. And this is also in part of why I think the Pacers shouldn't be ranked this high either, because they are already at 19 losses. And that's just, I feel like you lost way too many games to be put in the top 10 already, at least this early in the season. And the Milwaukee Bucks, that's another team. I don't think they should be ranked this high at all. Now, maybe they're figuring it out, but again, I do not trust the coaching duo of Doc Rivers and Darvin Ham. I do not trust it at all. I don't care that they ended up winning an NBA in-season tournament or the NBA Cup. I do not care about that. This is a team that is going to falter in the postseason. I can guarantee you. Now, being at 12, the Dallas Mavericks, that makes sense because the Dallas Mavericks, they've been really lackluster without Luka Doncic. They did end up getting Kyrie Irving back, but again, this team, even with Kyrie Irving, they were still struggling, and I understand why they had to move them down because they're not healthy. It does not make any sense. At number 13, the Sacramento Kings. I don't know why they're ranked so high. I am not a big fan of the Kings, and this big three that they have is just not working. Despite the fact that they're 22-20, I mean, it's not working. This is a team that should have had a much better record by now. It's not working. The Lakers, of course, being ranked below the Kings, despite the fact that they have fewer losses than the Kings. Of course, that makes total sense because, the power rankings, they do not like LeBron. They do not like LA. They do not like the fact that LeBron is 40 and still playing basketball. I have no idea why the Lakers are ranked so low. I genuinely don't. The Miami Heat, they are ranked at number 15. They move up despite Jimmy Butler being a little bit of an issue. Funny enough, Jimmy Butler was like, I'm back. I swear, he thinks he's Michael Jordan or something like that. Golden State, they end up moving up. I know they're going to move down after getting absolutely mollywopped by the Boston Celtics. They are also a rather disappointing team. They started out the season, I think, 15-5, and here they are 21-20. That is very, very disappointing. The Atlanta Hawks, 17. They move up from 21. Phoenix, another team that's been disappointing. They were the top of the league at one point, and now here they are 21-20. And you can make an argument that it's because of the off-season distractions, Bradley Beal the Phoenix Suns looking to trade Bradley Beal and things like that. But still, this is the Phoenix Suns team that was ranked at number 1, and now here they are all the way down at number 18. Now, the Pistons, I will say that this Pistons team is way better than the last few Pistons teams, so anything is a win for the Pistons at this point. The Orlando Magic moving all the way down from 14-20 makes absolutely zero sense, in my opinion. Again, they are very short-handed, and I totally understand that, and that's why their offensive rating is so blah. But still, this is a team that, with Paolo Banchero, is going to be very, very solid. I have no doubt in my mind that they are going to be an incredibly solid team. So them being this low does not make that much sense to me. Spurs being at 21, I guess it makes sense. Philly being at 22, they should be at 23. The Pelicans moving up, that makes a little bit of sense too. The Blazers staying there, and all of these mediocre teams are basically where they belong, especially Washington. So, not really much that needs to be said on the bottom part of these teams. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of each and every team, but I have to be weary on the time because I gotta worry about classes and stuff like that. So, we're going to go into a break. Again, it's a little bit premature, but I kind of have to. And after the break, we're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, my favorite topic to talk about. So we'll be right back after the short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. This hat is not willing to work with me. All right, there we go. So, as you guys can obviously tell, we're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys because I got my cowboy hat, and that's what I do every single time that the Cowboys do something bad or are in the process of doing something bad. I always wear this hat. So that's what we're going to do. In this third segment, we're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and how, well, there is a head coaching update, but there is also an interesting stat that I would like to bring up. So the Dallas Cowboys, now, they have the longest streak in the NFL without making a conference championship game. the longest streak. And the biggest reason why they have this streak is mainly because it's actually entirely because the Washington Commanders, after struggling to come up with a name for themselves and after struggling to come up with a new name for the franchise, they've been able to lead their team with this incredible quarterback all the way to the NFC Championship game, where unfortunately they have to play the Eagles. Now, in that game, I really do not want either team to win. I honestly hope that it ends in a tie, so that way neither of those teams make the Super Bowl, because it would hurt me, especially, I think it would hurt me more if the Eagles made the Super Bowl, more so than the Commanders did. But still, both of them would hurt me a lot, because the Commanders, like 2 seasons ago, they were basically, not even 2 seasons ago, last season, the season before that, and the season before that, they were basically the one team in the entire NFC East that the Giants were able to beat rather comfortably. It didn't matter what Washington's record was, it didn't matter what the Giants' record was, they would always beat them. And now the roles have completely changed, and I am left very, very sad. But we're not talking about the Giants. We're talking about the Cowboys and how they have not made an NFC Championship game. Also, fun fact, since 2010, every single NFC East team has made it to the NFC Championship game except for Dallas. Like, that is a crazy stat to really think about. And when you think about all of the opportunities that the Dallas Cowboys really legitimately have had to make it all the way to the NFC Championship games, like, it's unbelievable it's very believable how they haven't, but it's amazing how consistent this is and how often they do this. It's every single time, whether it's because Mike McCarthy's the coach, whether it's because you have Tony Romo at quarterback or Dak Prescott at quarterback, it's the same story for them every single year, and it's unbelievable. And really, I mean, it obviously didn't start with this play right here, but it sort of enforced the notion, at least from my opinion, that the Cowboys and Dak Prescott are never going to make the NFC Championship game. They're never going to do anything in their careers, and they're never going to make it to the Super Bowl ever in the entire franchise's conviction, at least when you have Dak Prescott as your quarterback. I'm sorry to say this. Actually, no, I'm not sorry to say this, but Dak Prescott is simply not that guy. The fact that he is the most paid quarterback in all of the NFL right now is unbelievable to me. And the fact that you can be one of the most paid quarterbacks in the NFL despite not even making an NFC or an AFC championship game is kind of inexcusable, in my opinion. Like, you know, we talk about Josh Allen, we talk about Patrick Mahomes, we talk about Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, all of those teams and all of those quarterbacks making the big bucks, and Brock Purdy in line of making a lot of money as well. Those guys, they made it to championship games. Like, they've made it to NFC or AFC championship games. Jalen Hurts getting paid the big bucks. He's made an NFC championship game before. Like, and he's made it again this year. All of these quarterbacks, they've made it to their championship games within their respective conference, except for Dak Prescott. It's unbelievable. Like, it's unbelievable for me to think about. And like I said, with the opportunities, they've had chances to beat San Fran a couple of times, but then Dak Prescott decides to slide, or Dak Prescott decides to throw an interception. And where it really fell apart, at least in my opinion, was in their last year's matchup against the Packers, where they were clear-cut favorites, and no other team in the history of football at that point lost to the 7th seed in the wild card. That hasn't happened. That did not happen up until that game. And it's unbelievable for me to think about, because it's like, that is a crazy stat. I mean, being the second seed and losing in the wild card round to a 7th seeded team is unbelievable. And if you look at the score, you might think, oh, it was a really close game. It was not a close game. Dak Prescott did historic garbage time stat padding, and the game was really over after the first half when the Packers were up by 28 points, I think. It was a lot of points that they were up by because, of course, Dallas is going to Dallas. And speaking of Dallasing, now they have to sort of look for a new head coach since they got rid of Mike McCarthy, who I feel I'm very sorry for Mike McCarthy losing his job, honestly. Like, I feel like he was the best coach for the Dallas Cowboys. He always ensured that Dallas would lose before the divisional round and would never ever win an important playoff game. Important playoff game for them is divisional and championship game that takes them to the Super Bowl, which they haven't done since, how long ago was it? I don't know. I wasn't even born when they did that. Heck, I wasn't even conceived when they won the championship. The Super Bowl. Similar to how most of their fans weren't even conceived when they won the Super Bowl. Yet they think they make it every single year. It's unbelievable. But regardless, one of their coaches, that's expected to be the new head coach for the Dallas Cowboys is Brian Schottenheimer. Now, Brian Schottenheimer has never had a head coaching role in his entire career. He was mainly an offensive coordinator, and he's all of a sudden been the favorite for the next Cowboys head coach, at least according to those betting odds. Obviously, Dallas is still in search for a new head coach. But Schottenheimer has been on the Cowboys staff for the last 3 seasons, and the last 2 as offensive coordinator. And the Cowboys owner, Jerry Jones, has always put a priority on coaches that he is familiar with, so there is a good chance that he could end up being their head coach. It would be a surprising hire and likely not a very popular one amongst Cowboys fans, which is why I'm wearing this hat, also to make fun of the Cowboys in the postseason. But it's not entirely sure if this is really the coach that you sort of want. And he's never been a head coach. And it's similar to the issues that the Lakers were having with hiring JJ Redick as their new head coach. The biggest problem for JJ Redick was that he has never had a head coaching experience in his entire life. And that was a little bit skeptical. And there's reason for skepticism. You have no idea how they're going to translate into the big leagues. And as a coach with working on a very competent organization. Now, the past 2 seasons, he was Dallas's offensive coordinator, but Mike McCarthy would always be the one that would call the plays. So whether or not Schottenheimer is going to be better than Mike McCarthy it's still rather unclear. But just because the betting market is moving towards Schottenheimer isn't necessarily proof that he will get the job. And NFL draft markets odds makers don't necessarily have all that much inside information, so just take that with a grain of salt. I'm just giving this update just to let you guys know who exactly is on the table for Dallas and who Dallas might end up considering. So with that said, that's all that I also mentioned Deion Sanders in a previous segment before that, and also the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles as being a possible candidate for the position of the Cowboys head coach. But again, it's still up in the air. I have no idea what Dallas is going to do. But regardless, what they do won't change anything. They're still going to lose before the divisional round, and they're still not going to make the Super Bowl. It's that simple. But with that being said, that's all that I have in this third segment. I think we've had enough fun making fun of the Dallas Cowboys. So now we're going to go into the fourth segment where I recap all of the NBA games that happened over the weekend. And I'm probably going to do that a lot quicker than normal just to be mindful of time and when I have class. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be going over all of the NBA games that happened over the weekend, as well as the games that happened on Monday, because I did not cover any of the games over the weekend because, college football and, everything was college football in the last segments that I've done. So really just gotta go ahead and hold on just 1 second. Oh, that's a problem that I'm gonna have to fix. But anyways, aside from that, let's go ahead, get into this this fourth segment. Jesus, I am losing it right now, where I talk about the NBA games over the weekend. And let's see, where do we want to start? So the Timberwolves, they ended up beating the Knicks 116-99 over on Friday. Probably a reason why the Timberwolves are still ranked as high as they are. The Mavericks, they ended up stunning the Oklahoma City Thunder over the weekend, beating them 106-98. Kyrie Irving had 25. Klay Thompson had only 6 points because Klay Thompson completely forgot how to shoot. There was no Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this one, which is probably the biggest reason why they ended up losing. The Lakers, they ended up beating the Nets by 1 point, 102-101. Austin Reeves had a ridiculous 38 points. LeBron, at 40 years old, dropped 29 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds. I don't know how you can look at LeBron and not say that he is the greatest basketball player to ever live. This was also with a rotation that lacked Anthony Davis, and they were still able to beat the Nets. Now, obviously, this is the Nets, so not very impressive, but regardless, without Anthony Davis, still pretty impressive. Now, the Magic, they ended up losing to the Celtics 121-94. Really a little bit of an embarrassing loss for the Magic, but again, this is the Celtics we're talking about here. Jason Tatum had 30, Jaylen Brown had 20, Derek White had 12, and Porzingis had 23. Very, very difficult to beat the starting five. The Bucks, they had 130. They won against the... Hold on just 1 second. Well, okay, that's interesting. The Bucks, they ended up beating the Toronto Raptors 130-112, and I'm just looking at this because the reason why I said that's interesting is because apparently all classes were canceled. I'm gonna have to look a little bit into that, but the Denver Nuggets, they ended up playing against the Miami Heat, and they ended up winning 133-113. Just looking at the box score of this game, Jamal Murray ended up dropping 30 points. Nikola Jokic had 24, 12, and 10. And Russell Westbrook had 11 points and 7 assists. Now on Miami's side, Jimmy Butler had 18 points. Tyler Hero had 22. Bam Adebayo had 16. Now, I'm going to try and skim through all of this because I do have to take a look at that email because it does seem very, very important. And the Hornets, they ended up playing the Bulls 125-123. They ended up beating them. And hold on just 1 second because, this is a... You know what? I'm actually going to go into a break real quick, and I'll be right back. It's going to be very, very short. I'll be right back to talk about these games, but this email is very, very important, so I apologize. Alright, so I'm back. Sorry for that, but all of my classes ended up getting canceled, so I prepared for absolutely nothing. Oh, that's super funny. But anyways, now that means I can actually go a little bit more in depth in some of these games. So we left off with the Nuggets beating the Miami Heat. The Pelicans, they ended up beating the Jazz. Not really much that I have to say about that game, aside from, maybe the Pelicans are finally gaining some traction now that they're actually, legitimately healthy. And, Zion Williamson had 24-14, CJ had 26-5-4, and, just an overall great game. Aside from DeJounte Murray, who only ended with 8 points. Very good, very solid game from the Pelicans, but again, this is the Utah Jazz we're talking about. Now, the Charlotte Hornets, they ended up beating the Bulls 125-123. I looked at this game, didn't really talk about it, but the Ball brothers, they were going up against each other. Lonzo Ball obviously going up against LaMelo Ball. LaMelo's the starter for his team. Lonzo's Ball comes off the bench, mainly because Lonzo doesn't want to get hurt. LaMelo had 26 points and 9 assists. He did go 1 for 9 from 3, which is very, very disgusting. But again, he's LaMelo Ball, so this is what he does. And let's see. Mark Williams ended with 19 points and 19 rebounds, and Miles Bridges had 21 points. And on the Bulls side, Vucevic had 40 points and 13 rebounds. Zach LaVine had 19 points, but of course the team ended up losing still. And as I mentioned before, the Grizzlies, they ended up beating the Spurs 140-112, and they had multiple players within 20 points. They had Santi Aldama off the bench, 29 points, Desmond Bane, 22 points with 14 assists, and Jalen Wells had 22 points as well. On the Spurs side, Victor Wembanyama had 19 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 blocks, because of course he gets 6 blocks. And Stephon Castle, who I believe is going to be in the dunk contest, not entirely sure, ended with 20 points and 7 for 11 from the field. And Devin Vassell ended with 21 points, 7 for 13 from the field. Now, Saturday's games, the Warriors ended up beating the Wizards 122-114. Can't really say much about that game aside from the fact that it was Jordan Poole's rematch against the Golden State Warriors, his former team. Jordan Poole put up 38 points in this game and was noted for talking about how he likes some of his teammates, some of his former teammates on the Warriors. The reason why it's some and not all of them is because of what Draymond Green did to him in practice. I'm sure most of you guys remember that, but regardless, the Wizards, they ended up aside from Jordan Poole's 38 points, they didn't really have anything going for them. Andrew Wiggins had 31 and 11, Steph Curry had 26, Schroeder had 20, and that was really all she wrote in this game. Also, Draymond Green says he's sorry. So yeah, a little bit too late to say you're sorry about that, but, it's better than nothing. The Suns, they ended up beating the Pistons 125-121. Devin Booker had 35 points. Kevin Durant had 36 points. And let's see. Bradley Beal did not play in this game, but fear not, they had help from Nick Richards, who dropped 21 points and 11 rebounds. And on the Pistons side, Cade Cunningham had 20 points, 11 assists, and still lost. Tobias Harris had 21 points, and Jalen Duren had 15 and 10. Now, the Pacers, they ended up playing the 76ers, and they beat them 115-102. Of course, the 76ers were lacking in every single one of the star players, Joel Embiid, Paul George. They did have Maxey, but 28 points from Maxey is not going to be enough to beat a Pacers team that's loaded with offensive talent. And I know I was talking down on the Pacers before, but they're a good offensive team. I just don't think they're a good defensive team. Now, the Cavs, they ended up playing the Timberwolves, beating them 124-117. Donovan Mitchell had 36. Darius Garland had 29. And really, that's all that she wrote for them on the Cavs side. Anthony Edwards had 28 points. Julius Randle had 20. Rudy Gobert had 17 and 12. Pretty close game. Considering that it is the Cavs and that is the Timberwolves, I wasn't expecting the Timberwolves to really make it all that competitive. Now, Houston, they ended up playing the Trailblazers 125-103, and the Houston Rockets ended up having Dylan Brooks with 22 points, Sengun 23 and 15, Jalen Green 26 points, and the Trailblazers didn't really have anyone in 20 points aside from Scoot Henderson, who dropped 21 and 11. It seems like Scoot Henderson is starting to elevate as a player with this season. But again, we'll see how the season concludes. The Nets, they ended up playing the Thunder, and the Thunder ended up beating them 127-101. Not a very, obviously, this Nets team is a Nets team that's still not really trying to win, and so whenever they lose a game, it's really not that surprising in the slightest at all. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 27 points and 10 assists, and Isaiah Joe had 24 points. Brooklyn Nets had nobody in 20 points. Well, shocker. And really, this game was boring. No, not really much that needs to be said. The Lakers, they ended up playing the Clippers. They lost 102-116. I think the Lakers at one point scored like 25 straight points, and they were still down by like 20, which just tells you the story of this entire game. Unbelievable stuff there. Anthony Davis, 16 points, 10 rebounds. LeBron James, 25 points, 11 assists. Roy Hachimura, 19 points. But on the Clippers side, you had James Harden with 21 and 12, Norman Powell with 22, Kawhi Leonard with 19, Ivica Zubac with 21 and 19. And when the Clippers are playing like that, they are very, very difficult to beat. The Spurs, they matched up against the Heat. The Heat completely destroyed them, 128-107. Duncan Robinson had 21 points. And off the bench, Kel'el Ware had 25 points. Terry Rozier had 20 points. Jimmy Butler was stupendous with 8 points, 7 assists, and 3 rebounds. But don't worry, he's good in the playoffs, so this is fine. But it's unbelievable stuff that he gets away with. And he shot 3 for 7, because of course he did. And let's see, on the Spurs side, Victor Wembanyama had 21 and 10. Devin Vassell had 23, 3, and 2. And that was really all she wrote for the Spurs, because there was no way that they were going to beat the Heat with them scoring the way that they were scoring. The Nuggets, they ended up beating the Magic 113-100. Now, Jokic had 20, 14, and 10 because of course he did. Christian Braun had 20, 11. And on Orlando's side, Paolo Banchero has been a little bit mediocre, but again, he hasn't played in a very long time, so I don't really expect much. 10 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. So, I mean, okay, but again, not a really Paolo Banchero performance. And the next game on this list, the Bucks, they ended up playing the 76ers. They won 123-109, and Giannis had 34 and 15. Damian Lillard had 25, 5, and 4, and Brook Lopez had 12 points. Now, Tyrese Maxey had 37, but guess what? The 76ers didn't have Joel Embiid, and they didn't have Paul George. Are you surprised? I'm not. It frustrates me because it's like, why do you get so much money just to not do your job? How is that possible? It does not make any sense to me. But enough disliking Joel Embiid and how he makes his money. The Portland Trailblazers, they ended up beating the Chicago Bulls 113-102. Scoot Henderson had 25 points again. DeAndre Ayton had, 15 points and 13 rebounds. And Denny Avdija had 20 points and 12 rebounds. Now, on the Bulls side, Zach LaVine had 27 points and he still lost. And Vucevic had 17 points and 11 rebounds. Now, the Wizards, they lost again. Shocker. The Kings were the team to beat them, but again, that's not really saying much because it is Washington. DeRozan had 24, De'Aaron Fox had 12 and 13. Sabonis had 29 and 18. Oh, and Malik Monk had 23 points as well. And yesterday's games, so we are at the home stretch, guys, promise. I'm actually going to speed through this because I want to go to the fifth segment. Hornets, they beat the Mavericks 110-105. Knicks beat the Hawks 119-110 because everyone knows how the Knicks feel about Trae Young. Nobody in New York likes him. The Celtics, they ended up smacking the Warriors, like I mentioned before, 125-85. Pistons, they ended up beating the Rockets 107-96. Timberwolves ended up losing to the Grizzlies 108-106. Cavs beat the Suns 118-92. Pelicans beat the Jazz again 123-119. And the Bulls beat the Clippers 112-99. So that's all that I have in this recap. So now we're going to go into the fifth and the final segment where I give an NFL coaching update as well as an NFL injury update. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Now, in this fifth and final segment, we are going to be doing a coaching update as well as a injury update. And hold on just one second. Just checking to make sure I don't get another email. And all right, so let's go with the injury first, because I feel like that's a little bit more important. So the injury that I'm referring to is, I'm sure you Eagles fans already know, is the injury regarding Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts, I mentioned this before when I was doing the reviews of the review of the Eagles game, and Jalen Hurts, he ended up getting hurt after a play. I forgot exactly when it was, but I do know he ended up getting hurt. He ended up hurting his knee, and he still was able to finish the game, but it didn't really look like he was able to do much other than hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley. Granted, I mean, do you really have to do much when you're on that team aside from hand the ball to Saquon with how he's been playing? I don't think so. Maybe if he wasn't injured, that would have still been the game plan. Who knows? But I will say, though, that if this injury is really major, this could affect the Eagles in the championship round. I mean, I tend to make fun of Hurts for doing, less than what I expect him to do, but I will say I have way more respect for Jalen Hurts at quarterback than I do with Dak Prescott. I mean, with what Jalen Hurts was able to do with Philly in that Super Bowl and in that season in general, it's like I got to give respect to this man for doing what he did. And unlike Dak Prescott, he's actually looked competent. Now, I will say that this season has been very meh for Jalen Hurts. But again, you give up your all-star caliber role and your superstar caliber role that he did have, the Superman role, you give that up for winning. You would definitely give that up for winning, especially in a sport like this. And when you have somebody like Saquon Barkley, do you really got to do anything other than hand the ball off to him? Manzano in the chat, he said, I was completely wrong. I thought the game was going to be closer than it actually was. Notre Dame put up a fight in the second half and made it interesting, but most of the game was a blowout. Exactly. Now, I'm just veering off a little bit. Yeah, most of this game was just a complete and utter blowout, and there was really no memorable moment. I was very disappointed in Notre Dame and how they played in that one. I was also very disappointed with the play calling deciding to take a field goal instead of going for it in the situation that you're in. I really, really, really do not like the fact that they played man coverage against such a highly touted and amazing offense that Ohio State is. I just completely disagree with the fact that they ran man. I just do not get that. I understand he won a Super Bowl, but do you think Jalen Hurts did not win a Super Bowl? He played in the Super Bowl. Very, very big difference there. But he outplayed Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl. So that's really what I was alluding to. But do you think Jalen Hurts is a quarterback that is good getting you to a championship game or Super Bowl, but it's not going to constantly win you one? Good question. I do think that Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. I think that he's good enough to get this. Wait a minute. I'm trying to rephrase the sentence. You know what? I'm going to back off on that. I think Jalen Hurts, he's a good quarterback. I'm not going to say that he is the only reason why this Eagles team and why previous Eagles teams were able to make it to the Super Bowl and were able to do a lot of things in that Super Bowl, or were able to do a lot of things in the postseason. Because I think that the Eagles team is a very good, well-rounded team with a good quarterback, a good running back, and good wide receivers, and a great offensive line, as well as a very solid defense. Like, they have everything that you need to win a championship. And it's usually all down to whether or not Jalen Hurts plays the way that he needs to play. Do I think he can do it? Do I think he can win a championship game? He's shown that he can. He's definitely shown that he can. But until the team steps up with him, can't really say that all that much. I hope it feels like I'm not insulting Jalen Hurts by saying that he's a quarterback that's gonna get you there, but it's not gonna get you over the hump. I mean, that is a little bit insulting. Again, I am a Giants fan, so it's not like I really care, and I hope that you're right, that he's a quarterback that is not going to get you over the hump. But from what I've seen in in the playoffs, again, he did have that very, very unimpressive playoff performance last year against Tampa Bay. But from what I've seen in the playoffs from Jalen Hurts, he's been pretty solid. And I mean, really, the quarterback that is not going to get you over the hump is Dak Prescott, plain and simple. But I feel like, with the right squad, Jalen Hurts, he could probably win this year. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a complete rematch of the Chiefs going up against the Eagles, but this time the Eagles get the upper hand because they have an amazing weapon like Saquon. Like, they don't have to completely rely on Jalen Hurts for something like that. And while that may or may not prove your point as a quarterback that is going to get you over the hump, it doesn't matter. Like, you do what you got to do to win. We all know Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback that can get you over the hump, but he's not playing like it, is he? He's doing it for the win. Now, as a Giants fan, this is a little bit off topic. Would you rather draft Sanders or Ward at number 3? Well, for one, we are not going to get either of those guys at number 3. We're getting none of them because the first 2 picks are going to be quarterback picks. And that is that. I have accepted that, and we are definitely not going to get either or. And if I was to pick between either or, however, I would love to get Cam Ward. Absolutely love getting Cam Ward. But seeing as how we do not have the number 1 pick in the draft anymore, we couldn't do that. And there was a chance we could have gotten, the 2nd, but since we're at 3rd, both of the teams above us are going to be looking for a new quarterback. So we're not getting any of them. Not getting any of them. But if your coach has to take the ball out of the... Again, this is just... We're veering off a little bit, but I can do that now. If your coach has to take the ball out of your hands, doesn't that mean he doesn't trust you with the game? No, because in this instance right here, if let's say the Eagles decide to just give the ball to Saquon as opposed to letting Jalen Hurts throw the ball, they are playing to their absolute best of strengths. Like, Saquon and that offensive line is almost unstoppable. When Saquon has the amount of room that he has to work with, he's going to put the ball in the end zone a lot of the times. And taking the ball away from Jalen Hurts' hands is just a sacrifice because that's what you need to do to win. That's what you got to do to win. When you have a talent like Saquon, you got to use it. You have to. You can't, just force your quarterback to play hero ball. You can't always do that. And while I do, again, I do see the point, how, okay, he's getting rid of he's not letting Jalen Hurts do what Jalen Hurts can do. But again, you gotta think of, a situation that's best to win. And with the way that Saquon is playing, why don't you give him the ball? Why don't you give him the ball? Now, if he wasn't playing like this, then there is a good chance that Jalen Hurts, with how the offense has been all year with Jalen Hurts, I don't think it's entirely his fault that the offense is lackluster. I think it has something to do with the coaching, because the second they got rid of their offensive coordinator, when they made it to the Super Bowl, they've been very, very weak offensively. I don't think it has anything to do with the players or Jalen Hurts. I think it has something to do with the coaching. I genuinely think it has something to do with the coaching, but that's just me. And speaking of coaching, I do want to give a little bit of an update on the coaching carousel and what's going on right now. So so we already talked about Jalen Hurts and that stuff, but the Bears are going to hire Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson as their new head coach. Obviously, this happens after the Lions end up completely disappointing everybody and losing in the NFC divisional round where they preemptively should have. And so with that move, landing Johnson on Monday afternoon, it completely took him off the table. So now the Jets, the Jaguars, the Saints, Raiders, and Cowboys are still in the interview process and looking for a new head coach. So let's see. Also, another major injury to be concerned about when going into this NFC Championship game is that the Commanders' starting guard, Sam Cosmi, is out with a torn ACL, and he suffered this torn ACL after the Lions game. So again, could end up being a detriment to Washington, but we'll see how that goes. So again, Bears, they hired offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, and let me just go ahead and look through these. Giants offensive coordinator Mike Kafka is going to get a second interview with the Saints. I believe today he's going to get his second interview. The Cowboys, they spoke to offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer for the head coaching job, as I alluded to before. The Jets are hoping to end Monday with Aaron Glenn as their new head coach. That's another update on the coaching carousel. Again, we'll see how that goes. Not entirely sure. And Robert Saleh is interviewing with the Jaguars one more time. And that's going to be very interesting. Robert Saleh on the Jags. I don't think he's going to make the Jags a very competent team, but we'll see how that goes. The Cowboys, they also interviewed Leslie Frazier, who was the Bills' defensive coordinator for years, and he spent last season as an assistant with the Seahawks. The Colts hired Lou Anarumo, as the next defensive coordinator for their team. The Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn is going to get a second interview with the Jets. Let's see, what else? And yeah, those are all the updates that I have with the coaches and the situations going on. So, I'll probably go a little bit more in depth if I have more time to do that in future segments. But that's just wanted to update you guys on what's going on in today's NFL. But that's all that I have. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. Really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, something that you're dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations. That way, if Super Chat's not your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That's all that I have for today on this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit.